Hello and welcome to today's Raising Well Nourished Kids podcast. Today I am joined with the gorgeous Michelle Hislop from Testwise Clinical Nutrition. And Michelle is here to talk about something that is so crucial to everyone's health, but we're going to be talking about building a resilient microbiome in kids. Thank you for joining us, Michelle.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here and to talk about what I feel like is a really, really important topic.
It really is, isn't it? So let's start with what a resilient microbiome actually is. What does that mean for someone who has no idea what a
Yeah,
microbiome is? Yeah.
no idea what that means. Yeah, so essentially the microbiome it's all of the bacteria that is living in your gut. So we're talking about, trillions of little helpers that, if you like, have a whole bunch of different benefits in regards to your overall health. I When I'm talking to my own patients, I often think of it as like an internal garden. So, like a flourishing garden with lots of different plants and flowers is like a healthy looking microbiome. And when it's really diverse and really strong, it can resist things like stress and weeds, which are like the bad bacteria. Um, you know, boost the immunity, so it helps to ward off things like illnesses, and it can even help us to combat things like antibiotic use and so forth.
Yeah. I love that analogy of the garden. It's lovely. I've not heard that before. So how does early life exposure affect this garden, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about the beginnings of life and the beginnings of exposure, if you like. So when babies are born, they're kind of born with like an empty garden, if you like. And then their first big exposure is birth. So as babies are born, they come through that birth canal and they get that little first dose of their mum's microbiome. Then comes things like breastfeeding, and through breast milk, we're actually provided with a really special type of fibre called 2-fucosiliolactose. And this type of breast, if you like, prebiotic fibre, it's really, really important because what it does, it feeds that first good bacteria in the gut. And this is a particular type of bacteria we call bifidobacteria. And this starts helping that garden grow nice and strong and robust. And then we start introducing solid foods, and it's like adding more plants and flowers, and different fibres and nutrients and textures. And most of this really helps to sort of build that microbiome in that first 2 years of life, which is really, really, really important in regards to that early exposure and experience.
Yeah, so there is a bit of a golden window for gut health. Like those initial early stages of life are so important, aren't they, for developing a resilient microbiome?
Look, absolutely. When it comes to that first 2 or 3 years, they're really, really critical.
Yeah.
So honestly, what a child eats, what they're exposed to, and even often, how they play outside can really shape this thing we call the microbiome. After that, it tends to be more established, but there's still plenty of opportunity to nurture it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned play. I mean, obviously, there's more to life than food, even
Yeah.
though I sometimes beg to differ.
Yes.
My whole life is around food. Um, but,
Yeah.
outside of obviously the foods that kids are eating in
Mhm.
those early stages of life, what else is important? Like, what other lifestyle factors are important for either supporting a healthy microbiome and perhaps some things that aren't so great for keeping the microbiome healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, things that can also enhance a child's microbiome would include things like outdoor play, having pets, and even getting, into the dirt. So I often think of sleep, play, and dirt as sunlight, water, and nutrients for that garden.
Oh, I
So
love it.
sleep supports, yeah, helps to nourish. It's that whole sort of approach that we have. But sleep, is super, super important for obviously childhood development, but it's also important for that gut brain communication. The outdoor play that kind of introduces more types of those bacteria and microbes to the microbiome. Things like pets or even soil exposure come bring with it even more beneficial bacteria. So simple activities like digging in the garden or rolling in the grass or just getting outside can really help to diversify the gut microbiome as well.
Yeah.
In regards to things that might hinder it, there's always going to be changes, I guess, in regards to the microbiome based on those early life exposures. Depending on you know whether or not the child was born, potentially through C-section, was potentially not breastfed. Things like this can have some impact on that first early exposure, but there's lots of things we can do to help continue to support that garden, if you like, post those initial loss of exposures.
Yeah. I know that's something like as a naturopath, when you, or a nutritionist or any holistic healthcare practitioner, when you're working with a child or even an adult, understanding, particularly with kids, understanding their birth and those early, like those understanding those first years of life really can inform the way that you progress, can't it, with the treatment plans that you come up with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of us will probably have that question in our intake forms around, whether or not, the child was breastfed and born by C-section. It simply is because we now know through quite a lot of research that those differences can have an impact, and us knowing that as a nutritionist naturopath, it does give us some groundwork to, well, something to consider in regards to helping to support that little one's overall microbiome. To make sure that we strengthen it from sort of here on out, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned antibiotics earlier, and I know as you were talking, I could almost hear our audience saying, what about antibiotics? I know,
Yes.
sometimes they are necessary and they are they're life saving. So there's always that
Yes.
concern, though, as a parent, if your child has to take antibiotics, how to support, what do they actually do to the gut, and what can
Yeah.
parents do to help their kids after they've taken antibiotics.
Yeah, so antibiotics, as you say, are, in some cases super, super important. I often think of antibiotics a little bit like a lawnmower for the garden. So they kind of remove the grass, the weeds, but they also remove some plants and flowers. And so what they can do is they can reduce the diversity and even kind of temporarily kind of weaken that little microbiome resilience. And so recovery can often take weeks to months, depending obviously on the type of antibiotic and the dose and the length and so forth. So one thing we can do is obviously support the gut, and how we sometimes go about doing that is by using something called probiotics. And I often also consider something called prebiotics as well during and then after the antibiotics, which can really, really help with recovery and sort of help that microbiome bounce back as well.
Yeah. Are there any particular probiotics that you would turn to, or is it a case
Yes.
by case thing?
Yeah, look, it can be case by case, but definitely certain child friendly probiotics that can be utilized is a particular type of probiotic called Saccharomyces boulardii. So SB is a yeast based probiotic, so it can survive against the antibiotic, and therefore it protects the gut. So quite good to take during the actual antibiotics when you're taking the actual antibiotics themselves. Other probiotics, such as strains like Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, a couple of different strains of that bifidobacteria, Breve and Longum, they have also been shown to kind of help with that recovery and that bounce back of that microbiome. As I mentioned, sometimes I use prebiotic fibres. So if you haven't heard of that term before, prebiotic, it's basically something that is within sort of plant fibres, and they play a particular role in feeding the good bacteria in your gut. So they can really help the gut in regards to recovery by making sure things grow back and are supported in that little digestion. So some prebiotic fibres that I like to use, one of them is called partially hydrolyzed guar gum, or PHGG. Sometimes I use something called oligosaccharide and inulin. There's quite a few different ones we can utilize. From a dietary perspective, these types of prebiotic fibres are quite high in foods like bananas, in oats and chickpeas, and some other foods like onions and garlics and leeks, which aren't as I suppose liked by little ones, but you can obviously hide them in complete meals. But honestly, if you're just feeding the little ones what I consider is like a whole food diet where you're giving them lots of different colourful fruits and vegetables, this is something quite simply can help keep that garden growing as well.
Yeah, it's foundational, isn't it? No matter what supplements you're
It is,
taking,
yeah,
that
absolutely,
food is foundational for the ongoing health of the garden or the microbiome. So
absolutely.
earlier you spoke about having like a strong microbiome and how it supports a healthy immune system. I know a lot of parents, can like they see their kids getting sick frequently. So how does the
Absolutely,
microbiome?
especially this winter. I feel like,
Yeah,
my gosh, the colds and flus have just been, back to back, unfortunately.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, pretty bad.
So does a healthy microbiome, how does that interplay with immunity?
Yeah, so we now know that about 70% of our immunity actually comes from the gut. So that's a huge, huge percentage. So if I was to use that garden analogy again, if our garden is full of weeds, so in other words, full of what we refer to as like maybe bad bacteria, or if you like maybe missing some key plants, missing some strains of what we refer to as beneficial bacteria. This means that the immune system can often quite, struggle. And what can happen when there is that imbalance going on in the garden is sometimes we can develop a particular condition known as leaky gut or gut permeability. And what happens then is that we tend to find the immune system is maybe slightly compromised. And this has been linked, unfortunately, to the development of a lot of different conditions. Some, for example, are things like eczema and allergies and inflammation. So it comes back to that importance of having that diverse and balanced microbiome to really keep that immune system regulated and resilient as well. So really, really important.
Yeah. So, for parents that are listening to this and wondering, like, is my child's microbiome okay? Is it healthy? Are there any signs?
Yeah,
Obviously, getting sick frequently, like a poor immune system, would be one sign, perhaps, that you would need to look at gut health.
absolutely.
Is there anything else, like any other, conditions, any other signs or symptoms of the microbiome being imbalanced in some way
Yeah,
or lacking in some way?
absolutely. Look, the microbiome is central for all health, for all areas of health. But in particular with kids, what we might look at is the obvious signs, and that might be in relation to their digestive health. So if they're getting a lot of like bloating and pain and maybe lots of smelly gas, maybe they feel constipated, or they're getting the opposite where they're getting maybe chronic diarrhea or diarrhea often. Some less obvious signs might be things like sensitivities to foods, And then we have conditions that I mentioned earlier, like with regards to things like eczema and allergies. We might be looking at a change in mood, so maybe quite dramatic mood swings. And then even things like resilience and low and energy. If your child has like low energy, often sometimes that can be related to what's happening in the gut, but it might be also related to how we are absorbing and utilizing food within the gut as well.
Yeah. And can microbiome testing be helpful?
Yes, absolutely. It's really important that if you're going to do any type of microbiome testing, to potentially do that with a practitioner who can guide you, because they often are quite complex. But I guess what the microbiome testing can show you is what's actually happening in that garden in real time. So if there is any imbalances or overgrowth or infections or problems with absorption and utilization, anything along those particular lines that could be impacting that child's overall health, then it can really help to, I suppose, guide a practitioner in knowing exactly what type of maybe dietary and lifestyle type strategies can really help that child, especially if they are already experiencing, I guess, those particular signs of microbiome imbalances,
Yeah.
for sure.
And these
Yeah.
tests are something that you would, as you said, need to see a naturopath or a nutritionist, like you said, who
Yes.
is qualified and familiar with the kinds of testing, because they are.
Yeah.
I've had my microbiome. They're quite detailed, so you need.
They
It's not something that you can kind of just organise yourself. You need to do this with a practitioner.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other thing to really be mindful about as well is the fact that a child's microbiome is changing quite dramatically in that first sort of 2 to 3 years. So if we were to consider microbiome testing in a child, say for example under the age of 3, we have to consider that it's more of a snapshot as well, but it can still give us some really good information. But it's really important that if you're doing it with a practitioner who understands that and where they're at, and so that they can obviously look at the results from that perspective as well, for sure.
Yeah. And not all cases
Yeah.
you would be recommending checking the microbiome with testing, would you? Like, I think clinically you can evaluate what needs to be done just with signs and
Yeah,
symptoms,
like,
family history, the
absolutely.
child's history.
With kids, it's good to be as least with regards to treat any type of treatment, to make it as simple as possible, and sometimes often getting them to getting the parents to collect the stool of the child can be a little bit overwhelming and confronting. And so yeah, look, when and if I would personally use microbiome testing, it would be for a very specific reason. And that would most likely be that they have been experiencing, say, for example, chronic issues for a period of time,
Yeah.
or maybe they've had, the first part of that development of the microbiome has been quite compromised through, those particular things we were referring to before regarding things like birth and breastfeeding, but also like the amount of antibiotic use one child might have had as well.
Yeah. So, what are
Yeah.
some common misconceptions around kids and their gut health that you've come
Great
across?
question. That's a great question. I think the biggest one I find, personally in my own clinic, is that the myth that all children are born with the same microbiome. I think that there's this like misconception out there that we all have like an identical looking environment. But in reality, every child's microbiome is actually quite unique, even like their own little fingerprint, if that makes sense. And so those early exposures and all of those microbiome milestones obviously play a huge part in that, and really can affect how that garden grows. But I think that's probably the main thing, is that misconception that all of our microbiomes look the same, when in reality they're completely different.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
many of our listeners could be listening to this conversation and, us talking about, including lots of colourful vegetables and lots of variety in a child's diet to support a healthy microbiome, but they have a picky eater. So do you have any
Yes.
advice for parents with picky eaters? I mean, it's obviously a very complex subject, and that's why we have this
Yes.
podcast, because there's so many aspects to picky eating. It's not a simple just do this and it will
Yes.
resolve, unfortunately.
No.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for parents of picky eaters?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I think about what I do in my own clinic, and one thing I do is always educate about the different, if you like, food compounds and components that really help to nourish that little microbiome.
Yep.
So something I talk a lot about, obviously, is the probiotics, the prebiotics that we've kind of mentioned already. But another particular compound that's really, really important for the microbiomes is a compound known as a polyphenol. So if you haven't heard that particular term before, it's simply just a plant compound that we now know feeds a lot of that good bacteria in your gut. So when I think of polyphenols, I always think of foods that have got a really dark pigmentation and very colourful. So that's things like your berries and apples and plums and spinaches and kales and red grapes. Even dark chocolate, interestingly, has a good amount of polyphenols, and things like walnuts and chestnuts and things like that. Prebiotics, on the other hand, they're super important as well. And we've kind of mentioned a couple of food supplements that we can utilize, like the PHGG and the inulin and things like that. But those prebiotics, as I mentioned before, are also quite prevalent in some particular foods. So, for example, things like your oats and your chickpeas and your bananas and things like that, and even your kiwi fruits are actually a really particularly high source of fibre. But knowing picky eaters, a lot of those foods are probably outside the scope of what we consider foods that picky eaters would potentially like to consume within their diet. So what I often do is I talk to the parents about maybe starting with adding in some prebiotic fibres, and a lot of the prebiotic fibres like PHGG, they're tasteless, and they can actually really easily be popped into and hidden in pretty much any food that you can think of. They can be heated; it doesn't really matter. It doesn't impact the quality of the fibre. And so when if you're cooking, muffins or smoothies or pancakes, or any type of meal, really, they can kind of be hidden in those particular meals. And so that's a way of starting to reintroduce some of that really good quality prebiotic fibre. Sometimes I also use something called like a polyphenol powder or REDS powder, which is full of all of, powders relating to food groups that are high in those polyphenols. And what I find with that powder is that it's very good at hiding in a lot of more of your sweeter meals, but you could probably hide it in muffins and other things as well. It might change the pigmentation of the food because they tend to be quite bright. The powders tend to be quite bright, but it is, again, another way of helping to just get those, if you like, fibres and prebiotics and polyphenols into the meals without challenging, that picky eater too much to begin with.
Yeah.
I guess other simple. Yeah, you go.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, I
sorry.
think there's a delay on our sound here, but one of the things that I have
Oh,
found
okay.
is one of the things that I found with picky eaters and where the microbiome is perhaps, a little below par, is that by improving the
Mm-hmm.
microbiome, you naturally will improve their appetite for foods
Mm,
and also the absorption of
absolutely.
really important vitamins and minerals that again help to support a healthy appetite. So it's a really foundational starting point, isn't it? Considering gut health, and
It
because
really
no matter what supplements you give, they all have to be absorbed by the gut, and no matter what foods you're feeding, they still have to be absorbed and assimilated by the gut. So it's like a win-win situation when
absolutely.
you're supporting gut health, isn't it?
It is absolutely, and it's absolutely pivotal for all of those things. And I think, without getting too complex or going into too much detail, I guess, but a lot of those initial developed bacteria, like the bifidobacteria that I mentioned, that as far as digestive functionality is concerned, has like so many important benefits. And as you mentioned, manufacturing, absorbing nutrients, regulating the immune system, helping with healthy digestion, and the creation of other fuel sources for other bacteria to feed from in the gut, protecting that mucous membrane. So if we're a picky eater and we're having foods that we maybe having more of, the simple white related sort of carbohydrate type foods, a lot of the constituents and components of those meals unfortunately don't provide that fuel source that those species like bifidobacteria kind of need. And so if we can get some of that fuel source coming in from some way, we can start redeveloping and growing and supporting those species. And through that, as you say, they get, start seeing a much better improvement in their overall digestion and better absorption and utilization of nutrients. So, yeah, absolutely, super important.
Yeah,
For
and
sure.
we know ourselves as adults. If you're not feeling great, your energy's low, you sometimes
Yeah.
don't have a great appetite for healthy foods. It tends to be when you
Yeah.
do crave, kind of simpler, refined carbohydrates and so forth. So it's the same, I think, with picky eaters. And as I said, it's a bit of a vicious circle, isn't it?
It certainly is. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah. And I think it's, yeah.
so you've got two
Sorry.
kids.
I do.
Yeah,
Yes.
9 and 12. You must be an expert at packing lunchboxes and snacks and feeding them. So, do you have any tips? I know lunchboxes and snacks is a tricky meal for a lot of families. What is some of your ideas?
Absolutely. Yes, gosh, isn't that a laborious task? Yes, so my oldest one, he's very good at packing his own now, but I guess things that I have done over the years is always thinking about color. So often my kids always get color through fruit and vegetables. So I always have like one fruit or one vegetable. My daughter often goes between your berries and your kiwi fruit. She's at the moment really loving red papaya with a bit of lime on top. And then, carrot sticks, celery, snow peas, these sort of things are often the fruit and the vegetable component. And then I often try to look at what I'm giving my children and adding to it. So if, for example, they're having some Greek yogurt, maybe with a good quality muesli, I'll add in some extra seeds and extra nuts and things to get, extra nutrients and fibers and things into that particular meal. I might cook, muffins are always really, really a good homemade option. You can do a batch on the Sunday, and they're very good at, in regards to be able to hide things in there. I use a lot of seed crackers and brown rice. Getting the wholemeal sort of options is really, really important as well. Buckwheat, rice crackers, things like this that are going to have more fiber in them. And then, hiding foods into particular homemade things as well. So, a favorite in my household is things like purple. I hide purple sweet potato and make it into like a homemade brownie, which goes down very well with both of my children. I have to kind of be careful as to how often I make that because it goes very quickly. But yeah, so it's all about, for me, getting variety and color and fiber in different ways. My kids will often have a sandwich with a good quality bread, things like that, the good old sandwiches and things like that as well. But I just always look at the quality and the fiber content and the color, and I try to sort of just pack all of that in if I can.
Yeah, yeah, great. Yeah, we love a
You
good
probably
sweet
have some better
potato.
ideas.
Yeah, we love a good sweet potato brownie. Actually, the sweet potato brownie recipe on the website would be one of the most popular. It's one of my earliest recipes, and it would be one of my most popular
Yes.
recipes as well.
Amazing.
I've actually pretty much most of my recipes always I'm always trying to add as much nourishment as possible. So like you, I'm always,
Yes.
adding ground seeds and vegetables where possible. I think we have, a muffin. Actually, I need to put that onto into the membership. Actually, I know in one of my ebooks I've got a muffin that I think I managed. It's either 3 or 4 vegetables I managed to get into one muffin, and yeah, again that's
Yeah.
super super popular. But yeah, I'm the
Yeah.
same. Just always trying to extend the amount of color and yeah, just, giving my kids a good kind of assortment. Well, I've only got one now that's still at school. And I unfortunately do still pack
Yes.
his lunch, which is disgraceful to hear that your 12-year-old packs his own and my 17-year-old doesn't manage to. Anyhow,
Oh, look, yeah. If he wasn't too good at it, if it was, yeah, I'd probably still do it. But he's pretty good, thankfully,
yeah. Oh, my
in
son's
making.
quite capable of doing it. It's
Yeah.
just, I've got
Yeah.
into some bad habits with him with early morning sport. And so, he dashes in the door and he's got
Oh,
15 minutes to get in and out and fed. And so I do all of the accessory
oh,
stuff.
that's
And
fair enough.
as I said, bad habit
Yeah.
to have gotten into, but look, it served him. What was I just about to say? Yeah, anyway, it's completely escaped me. I was going to go down another story. Um, let's talk about just to summarize, we've obviously spoken a lot about the microbiome and its various actions.
Yes.
What are just some key takeaways, some easy wins that parents can head away from this, listening to this podcast, and implement straight away this week?
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe this week you could consider looking at the fruit and vegetables that you're consuming each week. And I find that with most people that they tend to eat the same thing, so same fruit, same vegetable. So one thing you could do is maybe introduce one new fruit or one new vegetable. Often, it doesn't have to be a completely new vegetable. It could be like, instead of buying orange carrots, you could maybe buy like purple carrots, or if you're buying potatoes, maybe buy purple, sweet potato, or something that has more pigmentation and color, and that can be like a good swap out for kids who are maybe a little bit apprehensive. The other thing is, like, maybe considering how much outdoor play your kids are having. Is there ways that you could maybe incorporate more outdoor time? Parks, you book a family farms day, or you can go camping. Those sort of things can be a good environmental way of helping to encourage that building of that microbiome as well. That maybe isn't something you can do this week. Maybe the gardening or the parking, going to the park or something like that, could be a better option. If you do have picky eaters, maybe you could be considering like incorporating some of that, those prebiotic and probiotic foods, or fibres, or supplements into meals and snacks, and seeing how the kids might go. Or just rethinking things, like if you're having some yogurt, adding in those extra little bits, like the berries or oats with some seeds or something along those lines.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
smoothies are
just
obviously.
adding more. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say smoothies are obviously a great way to add
Yes.
in stuff without it kind of standing out too much.
Yeah, they are good.
Yeah,
Definitely. I wish my two liked smoothies more, but they've never really been a big fan of smoothies. So I've had to sort of try to do it more in the baked goods, but they are definitely an easy option for that hiding of things, for sure.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I know what I was meant to say actually earlier is you mentioned kiwi fruit. My only
Oh
wish was that
yes,
kiwi
yes.
fruit was more widely, like it's got such a short season. I just wish we could get it all year round. I love kiwi fruit. I think it's just such an amazing, powerful food.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, they're even adding the particular fiber that is within kiwi fruit. They're adding to a lot of prebiotic fibers now, just because
Ah,
they, as a way of helping to support the little microbiomes. But Look, I find with kiwi fruit, if anyone's constipated or has issues with constipation, it's such a great fruit to start with. Like, we often think of prunes and pears and things like that, but the kiwi can actually work just as well, if not better. I find with those who are experiencing that constipation, and just incorporating one or two a day, it can be as easy as that, just to help things become a little bit more regular.
Yeah, amazing. Great tip. I've always been too
Yeah.
lazy to peel kiwi fruit, so my whole family
Yes. Yeah.
love just eat it with
Eat
the
the
furry
skin.
skin. Yeah, it's just I think
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
stems from when they were little. I just
Yeah.
was too lazy to peel it. So now it's just what
Yeah.
they eat. They're just kind of used to the fuzziness. And I'm the same. I actually quite like the flavour with the skin on. It's kind of tartar or something. Yeah.
Mm. Absolutely. I think I always ate it with the skin on as well. And never knew that people do peel it, and so
Yeah.
you completely agree. My
Yeah.
husband, he peels it, and he's like, and he's like, you're not meant to eat the skin. And I'm like, I've always eaten the skin, so
Yeah. Yeah. It's
it
always
probably is
when
quite good. Again,
yeah. It adds
adding
extra
fiber.
fibre, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Every time I post a
Absolutely.
picture of, yeah, every time I post a picture of my son's lunch with this kiwi fruit with the skin on, I always get messages like, I can't believe that you send him with the skin on. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny.
Oh, there
Um,
you go.
yeah. Thank you
Need
so
to do a
much for your
poll.
time today. It has been so great.
No.
We're going to put ways to connect with Michelle in the show notes. All of the links will be there if you do feel that you need individualized support with supporting your kids' microbiome. Yeah, Michelle is definitely someone that can help you. So we'll pop her details in the show notes. Thanks again for joining us.